Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. The title of our video today is Jesus Ministry number 8. And the text we're going to be looking at is from Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 45. This is a story about a man who had leprosy who came to Jesus to be healed. And we learned some very important things about Jesus and his view on people and how he treated people and those sorts of things from this text. So it's a good one for us to think about as we're trying to learn how to do ministry in the world the same way that Jesus did ministry, how to treat people. And so that's what we're going to look at today. So we'll read our text as we always do. This is from the Simplified New Testament, my translation of the New Testament, the 4th edition. We'll begin with verse 40 of Mark chapter 1. A man with a terrible skin disease came to Jesus begging to be healed. "You can heal me if you want to," he said to Jesus. Jesus felt sorry for the sick man and touched him. "I do want to heal you," Jesus said. "Be well." As soon as Jesus said the words, the disease left the man, and he was cured. Jesus sent the man on his way, saying, "Do not tell anyone about this. Go to the priests and show them that you are healed, and offer the sacrifices required by the law." But the man did talk about it. He spread the news of what Jesus had done. As a result, Jesus could not even go into a town or village because so many people would come to see him. He stayed in deserted places outside towns and villages, and yet people still came to him from everywhere. Now, I think one of the important things to understand here, as I mentioned just a moment ago, is not only that Jesus did heal this man and he did treat the problem, but I think it's important to understand how he did it. And that's the key lesson here. Now, the way I translated it in my translation is I just called it a terrible skin disease. Some older translations will refer to it as leprosy. And if you look up the Greek word, do a background study and everything of all this, what you see is that word is used to refer to quite a number of serious, contagious skin diseases. There wasn't just one thing that they called leprosy. There were a series of contagious and serious skin diseases, and they called them leprosy. And if you had leprosy, there were some very serious restrictions on your social activity. Obviously, you could not participate in the religious society because you were considered unclean, and so you couldn't go, excuse me, excuse me, I've been sick and I still have a cough. You couldn't go to the temple, and you couldn't participate in the religious ceremonies and the religious holidays and things like that. There were very strict laws about that under the Mosaic covenant. And if you had leprosy and you were walking down the side of the road, you had to call out when anybody was in the vicinity. You had to call out, "Leper, leper," so that people would know that you had leprosy and they should avoid you. And normally they would cross a road and go way around you so they wouldn't come in contact with you. Because if they came in contact with you, then they were also considered unclean, and they had to go through rituals of cleansing and offer sacrifice and all sorts of things. So, people just wanted to stay away from lepers or people who had those serious skin diseases, because not only were they contagious and they could get sick from it, it caused all kinds of social and religious problems in their society. And so it was pretty much a big deal. So what that meant was if you had leprosy, you were a social outcast, that nobody wanted anything to do with you. And it was a sad and pathetic way to live. They had leper colonies where you would have to go and live with other people who had leprosy. You couldn't live in mainstream society and interact with people. That just wasn't allowed. And so you lived a very lonely life, and no one would touch you. It was just awful. It was just a really terrible way to have to live. And so one of the men who had one of these terrible skin diseases heard about Jesus and knew that he could heal him. And so he approached Jesus. And you can imagine that other people were kind of uncomfortable with this or unhappy with this. But Jesus allowed him to approach. And the man said simply, "You can heal me if you want to." Which is a very nice way of requesting and saying, "I would like for you to heal me." But he said it, "You can heal me if you want to." Excuse me, I'm very sorry for my cough. And Jesus then did something, I'm sorry, something amazing. He touched the man. He reached out and touched the man. As he said, "I do want to heal you," he touched him. Now, that would have been scandalous. Everybody would have, gone, "They touched you," because Jesus was endangering himself. He was touching somebody that could make him sick, and he was breaking social tradition and social norms. You don't touch lepers, you stay away from them. But you see, Jesus didn't care about that. Jesus didn't care about social norms. Jesus didn't care about what was socially acceptable in regards to those things. Jesus cared about the man. It may have been years since anybody touched that man. Do you know how lonely that is? Do you know how much damage that does to a person emotionally? Studies have been done. Psychologists have done studies to determine which of our 5 senses are the most important. And most people, if you say which of your 5 senses, if you had to lose them, which would you absolutely not want to lose? Your sense of hearing, your sense of taste, your sense of smell, your sense of sight, and everybody says, "Oh, I don't want to be blind. I don't want to be blind. I don't want to lose my sense of sight." Well, I understand that. I wouldn't want to lose my sense of sight either. But studies show that the most damaging physical sense to lose is your sense of touch. Because human beings touching each other provides an emotional support system like nothing else does. And yet in this first century, when these people had leprosy, nobody would touch them. So it wasn't just the physical sickness that was the problem for these people. It was the serious emotional difficulties that they had because they were untouchable. And yet for Jesus, the man was not untouchable. For Jesus, there are no untouchable people. We don't have too many challenges with leprosy in our modern societies today. Now, many of my listeners are in Africa or India, and there may still be some difficulties with leprosy there. We don't hear too much in America, but people can be, quote, untouchable for a number of different reasons. It doesn't just have to be that they have a terrible skin disease that's very contagious. People can be untouchable because of different kind of challenges or problems that they have in their life. Maybe they've had problems with drugs in the past. Maybe they've had problems with violence. Maybe they've had, especially in Africa or something like that, they've had challenges with demon possession. Maybe they've had problems with alcohol. Maybe they have challenges with homosexuality. Maybe we're talking about homeless people who live on the side of the road, sleep under trees and under bridges and things like that because they don't have any place to stay. Maybe they're dirty and smelly. Maybe they act funny. Maybe they're weird, right? Maybe they're crazy people. That's a word you hear a lot in Africa. When we lived in Nigeria, somebody whose behavior was bizarre, they would just say, "Well, that's a crazy person." Excuse me. That's a crazy person. Just stay away from that. It's a crazy person. Well, that's not really very helpful to call somebody a crazy person, but they were people that you avoided. And in our societies today, we have people that we avoid. Those of us who are considered normal, part of mainstream society, nothing wrong with us, right? There are other people in society that we try to avoid. We stay away from them because they're some sort of a problem. But you see, that's not the way Jesus conducted his ministry. Jesus didn't just spend time with the normal people. Jesus spent time with sick people. He spent time with marginalized people. He spent time with untouchable people. Jesus loved everybody, and he came to save everybody. Didn't matter what kind of problems they had. It just didn't matter, right? They were a child of God. They were loved, and they were lost, and they needed to be saved. And Jesus came to save them. And so he spent time with them. Now, a lot of the Jewish leaders didn't like that. Oh, he spends time with sinners and publicans and this and that and prostitutes and all that, And they didn't like Jesus doing that. See, but Jesus said, I didn't come to save the healthy. I came to save the sick. Well, there's a number of different ways you can be sick, right? I mean, you can be physically sick, like, I still have a cough. But you can be sick from different challenges that you've had, different problems that you've had. And maybe the word sick isn't even a good word to use. Maybe challenged, marginalized, socially unacceptable, untouchables. I think that's a pretty good word. Many people in many different societies are untouchable. But they weren't untouchable for Jesus. And they shouldn't be untouchable for us. If we are Jesus followers and we're going to minister to people the same way Jesus did and reach out to the lost, lead those who do not know God into a relationship with God, then there can't be any untouchable people. We have to love them all, and we have to try to save them all. Jesus was a wonderful example of loving everybody and caring for everybody and trying to save everybody, even the untouchables. So as you think about these things for a while, remember to read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.